Okay, now that we know how forces can shape Earth's crust through plate movement, we're going to now learn how have constructive and destructive forces continue to shape Earth's surface. So now we're going to go into a little bit more detail on constructive versus destructive forces on Earth's surface. Okay, so this goes with learning target 6. You should be able to explain and model how constructive and destructive forces shape the Earth's surface. So basically, you're going to need to understand the difference between constructive and destructive forces and examples of each. Okay, so a constructive force. These are processes that will raise or build up the surface features of Earth. So, constructive forces, convergent boundaries that form mountains, divergent boundaries when we have new seafloor forming for ridges. Those types of boundaries will raise or build up the Earth's surface. A destructive force is a process that will lower or tear down the surface features of Earth. Okay? Now, the two main ones that we're going to be working with a lot are weathering and erosion. So, weathering and erosion, remember, weathering is when forces from water, ice, and gravity and wind will break down rock into smaller pieces called sediments. Erosion is through the forces of water, wind, ice, and gravity. They pick up those sediments and move them. So these are destructive forces. They're tearing down or breaking down the surface of Earth. This also happens in divergent boundaries where you have valleys forming, and transform boundaries where you have earthquakes forming. Those are destructive forces. Now, we're going to look at surface features. Surface features are landforms and bodies of water that cover Earth's surface. So these are mountains, valleys, canyons, beaches, sand dunes, barrier islands, floodplains, glaciers, volcanoes, oceans, lakes, and rivers. These are all features of our Earth that are affected by those forces. And one force that's going to affect surface features is what we call mass movements. So we're going to take a look at this. I'm going to start from the beginning. These are all examples of mass movements. Okay, so let's take a look at these. So a flow can be destructive. It can cause the position of the mass to change. A slide, whether it's a rock slide, mud slide, is going to cause our surface to break down. A fall, a rock fall. So any sort of mass movement is going to change our surface and destroy parts of it and break it down. Okay, so now we're going to get into weathering and erosion, the two main destructive forces. Weathering is a natural force that breaks down Earth's surface into sediments. So weathering is a destructive force. Okay, so make sure you put that in. Weathering is destructive. Weathering is created by wind, water, gravity, and ice. Okay, let's take a look at an animation of weathering and erosion. So rocks are eroded and washed away by wind and water, but remember they're broken down into those pieces called sediments by weathering. That was it? Oh, I thought it was a little longer. So weathering is what breaks that rock into small pieces called sediments. Erosion is what moves those sediments. Okay, types of weathering. It can be mechanical or physical weathering. This is when ice freezes and it thaws. Wind and water on rocks, animals burrowing. These are all examples of mechanical or physical weathering. Mechanical and physical weathering don't change the rock at all into new material. It just changes the shape usually of the rock or material. Chemical weathering will actually change the chemical makeup of the rock or the matter. And that is in acid rain and rusting are examples of chemical weathering. So here's a picture of weathering through water from the rain. It's breaking that rock into smaller pieces called sediments. When those sediments get pulled down by gravity, that's erosion. Okay, an example of mechanical weathering, frost wedging. So water gets into cracks and ices, it freezes, and it splits the rock. So that's frost wedging is an example of mechanical weathering. Here's a picture of a rock being split in two due to frost wedging. Chemical weathering is acid rain. So what happens is you've got sulfate, that's what SO2, and nitrates, NO. Those are chemical compounds that get released into the atmosphere, usually it's pollution, gets trapped in our clouds, and when it rains, it comes down as rain, and that's acid rain. So that's chemical weathering. When acid rain hits trees and rocks, it can wear down and break it into smaller pieces and actually change the chemical makeup of that rock. Okay, erosion is the movement of sediments. So again, same forces cause the movement of sediments that weathering does. Wind, water, ice, and glaciers. So let's look at some examples. Okay, so we're going to show the different effects of erosion. So we've got a glacier. Okay, a valley glacier scrapes a U-shaped valley in Alaska. That's why it's a destructive force, because it's shaping the Earth's surface and tearing it down. Okay, sea cliffs, when that water hits the rock, it takes away the sediment and brings it back into the ocean, so it's tearing it down. So that's a destructive force. A river valley is going to wear away and erode and move the sediments of this rock and create a little valley, so that's destructive as well. Hey, maybe some of you have been here. Arches, okay. Wind hits these rocks and breaks down into sediment through weathering, then picks those sediments up and moves it through erosion. And so sand carried away by wind can blast through walls of rock to form arches, like the Arches National Park in Utah. It's a pretty cool place if you ever get a chance to go there. Desert monuments. Resistant monuments in Utah remain standing after the sandstone around them has eroded away. So same thing as arches. Sand dunes. Sand is a product of erosion. Huge dunes have accumulated in Great Sand Dunes National Monument in Colorado. Underground caverns. So weathering and erosion of soluble rock materials produce the Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. So this is where water has weathered and eroded the rock to form underground caves. Okay, so this is an example of cave formation, flowing water and eroding underneath to create a system of caves. Okay, so the last thing we're talking about is helpful human technology. So what are some things humans have done to help stop some of those destructive forces on Earth's surface? Because we don't want things, our surface, to be destroyed. So some of the things we've done, we've created dams. This stops flooding. It also creates water power, and it holds back sediments, so you no longer get so much erosion through rivers. We've created seawalls that prevent beach erosion. We've done terracing, contour plowing, and added vegetation, and this prevents soil from eroding. Okay, and the last is destruct volcanoes and earthquakes. We cannot control these. We cannot stop a volcano from erupting or stop an earthquake from happening. So we can't stop those destructive forces that shape Earth's surface. But scientists might be able to predict when they will occur. So we're getting better at predicting where they will occur. So there'll be less damage to human life. So those are some ways that we've tried to, that humans and our technology have helped stop some of our destructive forces on our Earth. Okay, so hopefully you guys now have a better understanding what a constructive force versus a destructive force. Okay, you can tell the difference between the two. You should be able to model and be able to show why some forces are constructive and why some are destructive, and how they shape our Earth's surface.